Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukhad Swarupaya Swami Netapaharine. Welcome all. In this session we will see the 6th chapter of Jnana Yoga, titled The Absolute and Manifestation. This again is a lecture delivered by Swami Vivekananda in London in 1896. Swamiji starts the lecture by actually showing up a diagram. In that diagram, Swamiji shows the Absolute and the Universe, and in between Absolute and Universe, time, space and causation are shown. The Absolute is A in this picture, the Universe is B, and time, space, causation is C. So Swamiji explains that the Absolute appears as manifestation through time, space and causation. That we experience time, space and causation, and thus we perceive the Absolute as manifestation. Some of the Western philosophers had propounded philosophies which resembled in some way to the Advaita Vedanta of Indian tradition. One such philosopher was Schopenhauer. Swamiji refers to his philosophy in this lecture and says that Schopenhauer makes the mistake of making will the absolute. But will is something within phenomena and hence can't be the original substance or absolute. Will, even if taken as a cosmic will, is related to the phenomena, to the manifestation of names and forms in the universe, and hence it cannot be termed as absolute, in which there are no names and forms and there is no manifestation or the world in it. So will cannot be the absolute. So here Swamiji points out, though these Western philosophers try to make the generalization as in Advaita Vedanta and try to present a subtle philosophy, it does not come near the real Advaita Vedanta. Swamiji then explains that law of causation is because our tendency in our mind to see the association in precedence and succession of events. We try to connect the events that have already happened and the events that are happening and the future that some event may happen. And we see a connection between these things. So that is the law of causation. This is because of that. So that is in the mind. The causation or law thinking, it seems like it is very natural to humanity. Humanity experiences itself as separate from each other, with events occurring in past, present, future, and there seems to be some cause and effect relationship between them. While this is true from the relative point of view, when we are talking about the absolute, there cannot be any time and space, and hence there cannot be any causality. So here the topic being absolute and manifestation, this is taken up. Now this causation and law thinking, which is almost integral to humanity, this may be due to the belief also that nothing is independent, or that there is always precision and succession to everything. That is the phenomenal experience of each soul. This also we can apply to when we ask the question why. Why such and such thing happen? Why is the world as it is? Why are human beings as they are? So here the question why takes into consideration already that time and law of causation. And this cannot be applied to absolute, where neither mind is there nor the law of causation exists. Swamiji explains that to ask why absolute became manifestation is contradiction in itself, as it assumes absolute under the causation law and a dependence on them. When we say absolute, it is beyond time, space and causation, beyond names and forms, and hence it cannot be under the causation law, or it cannot be dependent on something. It is that which is infinite, and everything that is experienced as the name and forms comes from that absolute, so it cannot be a dependent entity. So why absolute became manifestation is actually a contradictory question. So if you think deeply and subtly, this becomes very clear. That which is absolute is free from any dependence and causation. To know the answer to that question would amount to bringing absolute to the level of mind, which is under time and space. So this is quite clearly explained by Swamiji in this lecture. Further, Swamiji says that thus we see that absolute can't be known. That is, it being beyond the mind and beyond the causation law and time and space, it cannot be known. But from this, we may infer that absolute, that reality, that God, is something that is ever unknown and unknowable. But Advaita Vedanta says that God or Self is more than knowable, more than known. He or she or it, or whatever the Supreme Spirit we may call it, is the eternal witness of all knowledge. Swamiji says, in and through Him we breathe, in and through Him we exist. He is our real self. He is the eternal subject of everything. So, everything from thoughts, emotions, sensations, body, external objects and other beings, these are known. But the knower, the self, cannot be known. It cannot be known objectively, just as we know our thoughts, we know our emotions, we know our body and its pain and pleasure, we know external objects, we know other people and the world. But in that way, the self or God cannot be known, because the one who is cognizing this, the self or the God, is the very sense of that entity. So he is the eternal subject, as Swamiji says. He or she or that Supreme Spirit is the eternal subject. And in this sense, when it is said in Vedanta that the word that you are that, and when the aspirant realizes that I am that, or I am that Brahman, it is not a person or mind or any subtle thought of mind, but eternal subject as my reality. That is who essentially I am, beyond the mind and thought and expression. In that sense, the word that is to be understood. So that is about the absolute. But the topic is absolute and manifestation. So what is manifestation? What is time, space and causation? Swamiji introduces this by saying, first we see then that the question, what caused the absolute, is a contradiction in terms. And secondly, we find that the idea of God in Advaita is this oneness. And therefore we cannot objectify God or that reality. For we are always living and moving in Him, whether we know it or not. Whatever we do is always through Him. Now the question is, what are time, space and causation? Then Swamiji goes on to explain how time is always cognized as depending on two events. And similarly, space is that which separates two objects. So time and space are dependent, not that they are absolute entities. Time is entirely dependent on our state of mind. It is not something which is absolute in its own terms. It is defined when in relation to two events. Space similarly is defined in relation to two objects. In Vedantic terminology, this is called as Desha, Kala, Vastu, Paricheda. So we experience events and objects, and in that relation we have time, space and causation. And they cannot be separately defined, but they are experience, that is our experience. Logic says there can't be two infinites. Like now if we have absolute and then we have this time, space, causation and this experience of phenomena of separation, duality, subject-object duality and the manifoldness. And if you say that that is the absolute is one infinite and this is also infinite, then it is illogical to say there are two infinite. Infinite means that which has no limit and there is nothing else. So this cannot be logically true. We see some of the very great philosophies like Sankhya and others, they tend to veer towards this, and human experience also validates that body mind and then the absolute, time space and then the absolute. But this duality, Advaita Vedanta says it cannot be. There cannot be two infinites. Time and space cannot be thought of in abstract terms. They are always related to two events and two objects. And the idea of causation is inseparable from time and space. And then this can be explained in terms of name and form of wave on ocean surface. We see a wave and then we say it is a big wave or wave. Now wave is a name and it has a certain form. But what is it in essentially? It is just the water, same as the ocean. So apart from that wave name and a certain form, it is nothing but water. And it is just like any other calm surface of ocean water. Similarly, we all and whole nature is like waves of ocean. That supreme consciousness is the ocean, of which we are all waves or bubbles. And as soon as we as individuals, as names and form, give up our attachment and idea that I am limited so and so, this and that, name and form, then we immediately realize our true self as the infinite pure consciousness bliss. And that is what is mukti, the moksha, the goal from the transmigration of taking repeated births. So our whole struggle is to get rid of this clinging on to time, space and causation, which are always obstacles in our ways. That is what Swamiji says. By attuning ourselves to the eternal subject, the absolute, we can conquer these time, space and causation and this nature. So Swamiji says that the change always is subjective. The fish evolves into bird and then the evolution happens. That is, the environment didn't change, the subject changed. So he says all through evolution you find that the conquest of nature comes by change in the subject. So, and he says apply this to religion and morality, and you will find that the conquest of evil comes by the change in the subjective alone. And this is how Advaita system gets its whole force. On the subjective side of the man, to talk of evil and misery is nonsense, because they do not exist outside. To understand this properly, we have to understand that what even Ramana Maharshi says, that you who are talking about the misery and the external world, do not know who you are. So without knowing ourselves, we know everything about the world. But that can never work unless until we find out who we essentially are. Our understanding of the world cannot be true. So in that sense, Swamiji says that the Advaita system gets its whole force from the attaining the subject, that I, to the reality. No amount of external rectification of problems or world will ever be permanent, because it is already the degradation of the absolute into name and form. It will simply take another shape. So no problem can be solved just on the name and form and the external level. It can only be solved when the knower of the problem, the subject, is attained to the highest reality. And hence, to talk of evil and misery is nonsense, because they do not exist outside. So Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi too says that correcting oneself is correcting the world. Once you know who you are, then immediately everything becomes perfect. So that is the main point of Advaita Vedanta. Then Swamiji says that the Advaita Vedanta saved India twice from materialism. first in the form of Buddha and later in the form of Shankaracharya. Before Buddha, very crude materialism of the variety wherein all sorts of immoral behavior was allowed had almost destroyed Indian civilization. With the advent of Bhagavan Buddha, the light of Vedanta reached masses and India was saved from ruin. After Buddha, after about 1,000 years again, such a situation arose because Buddhism had degraded to such an extent by allowing all sorts of tribes and races to be incorporated within itself, that it was, and also the nihilism propagated by later Buddhistic philosophers caused materialism to gain upper hand, and again Indian civilization was in danger of getting ruined. Then arose Sri Shankaracharya, and he brought again the light of Vedanta from Upanishads, and by traveling all over India, re-established the pure Vedanta Dharma. Swamiji says that in the Upanishads, the arguments are often very obscure. By Buddha, the moral side of the philosophy was laid stress upon, and by Shankaracharya, the intellectual side. He worked out, rationalized, and placed before men the wonderful coherent system of Advaita. Though Swamiji gave this lecture more than 100 years back, now looking back, we can say that Vedanta saved India not twice but thrice, in the form of invasions from Muslims and British. Indian civilization and culture was threatened again with materialism and doubt in 18th and 19th century. With the advent of Ramakrishna Vivekananda and their expounding Vedanta and living Vedanta and making it practical, India was thus saved again by Vedanta. Then Swamiji says that Vedanta can save Western world in the present time, and it can be the future religion of all, as it can make poetry and philosophy, science and religion meet. It is also non-destructive. It does not disturb the lower modes of worship, but raises them higher and higher. Generally, it is seen that dualists, no matter which religion they belong to, by their own constitutions are exclusive and narrow-minded. They love only their own path and say everything else is evil. So that fanaticism in dualists is somewhat natural. But Advaita has no quarrel with them. Vedanta says God is infinite existence, infinite knowledge and infinite bliss. And Swamiji says it is possible to have the intellect of a Shankara with the heart of a Buddha. I hope we shall all struggle to attain to that blessed combination. And by taking our stand on that Advaita Vedanta, Swamiji says we can look upon all sorts of philosophies, religions, sects with the attitude that they are all valid paths to reach the highest infinite self. Thus, in this lecture, the Absolute and Manifestation, Swamiji has shown how the Absolute appears as the manifestation through the time-space causation prism, and how did the Absolute become manifestation? This question cannot be asked because it is a contradictory question, because the Absolute, by its nature being infinite, cannot be changed into anything else. But due to the superimposition, it appears to be divided into multiple shapes and forms. Swamiji also shows how Advaita Vedanta has saved India multiple times, and with this broad Vedanta can be the future religion of humankind. So this is the Absolute and Manifestation. In the next chapter, Swamiji will be explaining God in everything. Om Tat Sat.